Hello, it's Snowflake here, and if you watch Secret of the Wings, you know that there has been this rule where warm fairies couldn't be in the winter woods and winter fairies couldn't be in the warm seasons. In this video, I'll be analyzing a few questions like how the law came into place, how Ree and Mallory fell in love, and how we could get to the winter woods at Pixie Hollow and all that sweet stuff. So, let's get started. So, the reason why warm and winter fairies aren't allowed in each other's realms is because warm fairy wings can't handle cold temperatures and vice versa. This could cause the wings to freeze or melt and eventually break. And the reason behind this is because of how fragile fairy wings are. For example, they drown a fairy in the water and are impossible to wash on your own. So it wouldn't be surprising if the wings would only be used to the temperature the fairy was born in. The reason why the border separation rule came into place is because when Lord Mallory fell in love with Queen Clarion, he crossed the spring border and broke his wings. Fairies knew it was dangerous to cross the border back then because, according to Lord Mallory's story, he said he knew how dangerous it was to cross the border, but he wanted to be with his love interest. So fairies knew how dangerous it was to cross the border and refused to cross in fear of having their wings broken, which is why we only heard of Lord Mallory breaking his wing, and it doesn't seem like anyone crossed the border other than Lord Mallory. And Ree and Mallory never actually crossed until like days later, so fairies did know that rule back then. However, before the rule was set, it was okay for fairies to meet in the border and talk to each other there, but I'm not sure many did that, as it would be unusual to just hang out on one side of the border in hope of meeting someone on the other side while there's work to be done. But this video will be about how Ree and Mallory met. Well, one important fact to consider is that they're both part of the Fairy Council. I wouldn't be surprised if they still interacted with each other via the quickly melting snowflake messages. Just like I proved in my last Winter Woods Relayed video, the Minister of Winter is actually a warm fairy. She's the only minister that can't interact with all the fairies that help with the season, as unlike the other seasons, winter fairies help in the winter. She must be able to communicate with Lord Mallory, as he's the only winter fairy in the Fairy Council. Okay, so how does this have to do with Ree and Mallory meeting? Well, it could be that the time they met is when Ree or Mallory first took the throne. Just think about it. Queen Clarion said in the movie that she met Mallory, quote-unquote, when Pixie Hollow was very young. And she was the queen at the time because she made the decree that warm and winter realms should remain apart. But was Ree the queen during Pixie Hollow's early years? According to some of the books, there are multiple queens in Pixie Hollow. If Ree was literally the queen since Pixie Hollow was very young, she would had to have been the queen for such a long time. I'm guessing that when Ree was talking about when Pixie Hollow was very young, it could be when the Hollow became part of Neverland. If I had to guess whether or not Ree arrived when the Hollow was separate from Neverland, I say she would have arrived when the Hollow was separate, due to the difference in her wings. You could argue that the wings transformed when she became queen, but Never fairies have gone through several changes, such as the fact that older fairies appear taller, and don't say it's just the leaders that were taller, because first of all, they likely didn't arrive with the titles of queen and ministers, and the conductor of Tinkerbell and Lost Treasure appeared to be tall. So when Ree mentioned Pixie Hollow being young, it's likely when she was the Hollow was first added to Neverland, because maybe she would have seen the past and future Pixie Hollows as very different. The trees were different, but I came up with this idea because they seriously don't think Ree was the queen in the dawn of Pixie Hollow, as there are several other queens. Anyway, Ree or Mallory, or maybe both, likely became the queen or ruler or whatever shortly after Pixie Hollow was officially part of Neverland. They could have arranged an in-person meetup in the border when one or both took the throne. However, the first royal meetup took an unexpected turn as they fell in love. They met at the border every sunset not for royal purposes, but because they were in love. But the more they saw each other, the stronger their desire was to actually be together. So Lori took the risk and crossed the border. Queen Ree made the official decree that the warm and winter seasons should remain apart because she didn't want any fairies to have their wings broken, and Mallory agreed. Although many fairies still wouldn't have crossed the border in the first place, it could be possible that there could be random meetups at the border, especially since the animals cross the borders every year. Rhea and Mallory probably didn't want to cross the borders at first, but as their love grew stronger, Mallory just couldn't resist crossing. So the law protected warm and winter fairies not just from crossing, but from physically talking to each other at the border as well, like when after Periwinkle crossed the border in Secret of the Wings, Mallory forbid Tink and Perry from ever seeing each other again, so they won't ever get the temptation to cross. However, the warm and winter fairies could still communicate with each other via snowy owls, but only when it has to do with changing the seasons. But wait, in Secret of the Wings, Tink and Perry broke the law by crossing the borders. Why didn't Rhea and Mallory punish them? Isn't that what happens when the law is broken? It could be possible that Rhea and Mallory were planning on thinking of a punishment for Tink and Perry, but they are distracted by the snowstorm. The reason why they wait to punish them is because they understand why Tink and Perry crossed the border, because they want to be with someone they love. Just like how Mallory crossed the border so he can be with his love, but after the Frost Fairies helped protect the Pixie Dust tree from the storm, and Rhea and Mallory got to reunite again, they decided that Tink and Perry would be allowed to meet at the border. Eventually, they realized that frosting wings would protect warm fairies when they traveled to the winter woods, so warm fairies would be allowed to cross the border. As for the winter fairies, they could only cross the border with the giant snowmaker or maybe a snow cloud silly sweet or something. But it was a while before the winter fairies could enter the warm realm, as according to a timeline from a previous video, the winter fairies visited the Four Seasons Festival about 2 years or so after Secret of the Wings. Okay, so we know about the border crossing rule for the movies, but what about the online world? How can non-winter fairies easily access the winter woods in Pixie Hollow before the sister celebration? The best explanations for that are that wings are frosted, but that was after Secret of the Wings. I guess the best explanation is the fact that the Pixie Hollow timeline isn't the most reliable. After all, the sister celebration in Pixie Hollow took place a year after the Welcome Home party, and the junior novelization confirmed that these two movies took place in the same year. So the reason why we can go to the winter woods is because now warm fairies can enter, but I guess the Pixie Hollow timeline is confusing. But I hope you enjoy this theory, and I'd like to thank those that responded to the thread I made corresponding to that video. It helped a lot, though the question at the end is still an enigma. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to, I recommend checking out the one which shows the difference between Minister of Winter and Lord Balori, and I made another one about the Pixie Hollow timeline. And I'd like you to stay tuned for more theories, and thanks for watching.